cards for the kids, and she'd make these little cards, and I know Rebecca can tell you when they were a certain age, she would write the Bible verse or something and have them to draw a picture for somebody she was wanting to encourage. Just because you can't do what you would like to do doesn't mean you can't do something that makes a difference. And so if you're here today and probably in every crowd there's going to be some grandparents that are limited and heartbroken because of what they can't do. But don't use that as an excuse not to do anything. And don't use that as an excuse to blame your children for blocking you from doing that, because that's not helping anybody. Being bitter over what you can't do, it's not going to fix anything. So I encourage you, and the importance of this, Dwight L. Moody, the evangelist, said this: if I could relive my life, an incredible evangelism that had great effects, at the end of his life, he said, I would devote my entire ministry to reaching children for God. And see, that's really what we want for our grandchildren, isn't it? We want them to know God. And so as I was reflecting on this, I just really want you to look at this. I work with Recovery Court, and I want to talk to you a little bit about the incredible power of impartation and how we can make a difference. In 2 Timothy chapter 1, verse 5, he says, when I call to remembrance the genuine faith that is in you, which dwelt first in your grandmother Lois and your mother Eunice, and I'm persuaded that is in you also. Therefore I remind you to stir up the gift of God which is in you through the laying on of my hands. So he says, this gift has been imparted to you from family members, and now I'm sure it's in you. So we have this opportunity for impartation. And I work with the Recovery Court, and one of the things that God has opened up an opportunity for me to do is to work with our court system. It's volunteer, and we take people that have been addicted with drugs to the point that they've been arrested and they have a sentence. And if they have nonviolent crimes, then they get released from prison and live in a controlled structure, and they meet with us once a week, and then later on they graduate to once every other week. And if they make it through the process, then they're released from their sentence. They don't make it through the process, they're not. So one of the things that we learn through that is ACEs. Has anybody ever heard of ACEs? They discovered in 1995, a doctor discovered of the Centers of Disease and Control discovered that there are 10 different adverse childhood experiences that they call ACEs that lead to individuals with ACE scores of 4 or more were 12 times more likely to have attempted suicide. They were 7 times more likely to be an alcoholic, and they were 10 times more likely to have injected street drugs. And if they scored, and we'll look at the 10 in just a minute, with scores of 6 or higher, in other words, 6 of the 10 things that's there on your list were in their life, they had an almost 20-year shorter lifespan. And that was, one was physical abuse, another sexual abuse, another's verbal abuse, and physical or emotional neglect, separation or divorce, a family member with mental illness, a family member addicted to drugs or alcohol, a family member who is in prison, witnessing a parent being abused, or substance abuse within the family. Out of those 10 things, and thank God, even if you've experienced them, you can be set free from them, okay? So we're not labeling that, but they have found, outside of the miracle working power of God, outside of a few other things that we'll talk about, they have found that these are a predictor. And we did this one time. We had about 12 in Recovery Court at that time, and we had 12 there that day, and we did that test, and every single one of them scored 7 or higher. Every single one of them. And so, so just realizing that that's going on. And you say, well, why are you bringing that? Because, my children, I have grandchildren that might be facing that. Here's why I wanted to bring this, because the power of impartation. A study from Brigham Young University found that positive experiences, boy, I'm on fire, like having strong relationships with trusted adults, can mitigate the effects of childhood adversity and lead to long-term health benefits. And of course, we can find that in the Bible anyway, but isn't that good news to know that you can be the effect that turns around the opposite of what their experience should cause in their life? And so it says, if your child has experienced trauma, the positive experiences in childhood lead to better physical and mental health no matter what they have faced. No matter what they faced. And so in the relationships, they did a study from birth to 18 years old, and they found out that these protective, positive relationships from one or more adults that they trust and that are positive with them negates a large part of these negative things. Turn to your neighbor and say, I can make a difference. And I know what happens a lot of times with grandparents is you feel like, and often in these situations, you get shut off. You don't get the same access that you'd like to have, and it's like, I can't do anything. You can be that trusted adult. We can. And, that's where I wanted to start. We're going to talk about a few rules as we go on, some things that will help us in our relationships with our families that will open up more of those opportunities. But again, I really wanted to start off reminding you that you have the power of impartation. And how you respond and how you act is going to govern how much power you have in that. See, if your children are cutting you off from your grandchildren, and all you can do is badmouth them in front of your grandkids, then you're not going to become a trusted adult. So we have to remember these things, because when we get frustrated over these things, often we complain instead of being difference makers. What can you do? What do you have the grace to do? I have the grace of God that has opened up my life to be incredibly involved with my children and my grandchildren. They've even moved down the street from us, and we've opened up a hotel, a dining room, a game room, whatever they need, hamburgers, whatever it is. Recently, we've increased our workload, but even if you don't have that grace, if you don't have that opportunity, don't give up on making a difference. Don't give up. Don't let bitterness cause you to be part of the problem instead of part of the solution. Because as this study showed, which we could find in the Bible anyway, that there's hope. But as this study showed, we can help our grandkids, if they're in that situation, overcome these adverse effects in their life. And so successful family relationships, and we talked about that a lot this morning, are founded in agape love. And in Hebrews chapter 10, verse 24 says, and let us consider one another in order to stir up love and good works. The word consider means to fully observe, to perceive, to understand. And stir up means to stimulate, to cause someone to feel a strong emotion and a desire to do something. So as we talk about impartation, we have that ability to do that. We have the ability to make a difference in their lives. And thank God for that opportunity. Thank God that we don't have to give up. Thank God that no matter what's going on in their life, as the Bible says, I believe it's Jeremiah, yet there's hope for you. And yet there's hope for our children and our grandchildren. There's hope for our society. So I want to talk to you a little bit about changing gears a little about love exhortations between parents and grandparents. Now we're going to talk about some things not only in how we relate to kids, but as we relate to each other this way, it'll open up more opportunities. Sometimes we think it's them, and the reason why they're treating us the way they're treating us is because of us. And that can be hard to own. So here's some love exhortations between parents and grandparents. And the first one is resist codependency. Both ways. If you're a parent, resist being codependent on your parents. If you're a grandparent, resist allowing your kids to be codependent on you, and resist being codependent on them. And sometimes, some parents don't, and I've had some friends and family members talk about, or some people that I know that are close to me talk about a parent who does not even know how to relate to their children that don't depend on them. They take it as an insult. So they can't relate to them because they think their whole mindset of what a healthy family is, you depend on me. You got to have me. You need me. So that's codependency. And realize this about codependency. You cannot be codependent without at least two people. It is an impossibility. In every codependent relationship, there is an enabled and there's an enabler. Every single, not most of them, in every single one. Sometimes there's 8 or 10 on each side, but there's at least one on each side. The enabled, someone who requires from someone else that they should do for themselves. That's somebody that's been enabled, when they're taking from other people what they should do for themselves. And the enabler is someone who does for them what they should be doing for themselves. And folks, it's so easy in the name of love. Listen to me. It's easy in the name of love to create a codependent relationship. Because we think that love is doing everything for everybody and never challenging them. The Bible shows that if you look at it, there's always, love is a two-sided coin. And look at Jesus. Look at the way he worked. It's full of compassion. It's kindness. It's soft. But it's also firm. That's the other side of it. You say, well, which one's love? It's got to have both to be a coin. I got a feeling, I never tried it before, but if you have a coin that only has one side on it and somebody notices it, I don't think they're going to take it. We'll figure it's counterfeit. And remember, one of the best examples of that is found in Jesus with the woman taken in adultery. He challenged all the people that were judging her. With her, he was compassionate. He was kind and soft. But he also told her, neither do I condemn thee. With a firmness, he said, now you go and sin no more. And so, that's why we have to resist this codependency. Abraham Lincoln once said, you cannot help people permanently by doing for them what they could and should do for themselves. And again, you have to resist that. This is for parents and grandparents. Resist being codependent on your parents, but also resist allowing them to be codependent on you. Even as grandparents, if we're not careful, it's easy for us to get value out of living through our grandchildren, and we start overstepping boundaries. We start paying for things that we should be staying out of. And I'm not saying we shouldn't help our kids, but, we create problems through this codependent mindset. And so I just really want to encourage you that, in 2 Thessalonians, here's what he said, for even when we were with you, we commanded this, if anyone will not work, catch that word, not cannot, will not work, neither should he eat. Resist codependency in your relationships. Be willing to talk to somebody about it, and be willing to admit that we all, to a degree, have a tendency to codependency. It's easy to look at somebody that's extremely out of bounds and say, well, I'm glad I'm not like them, when at another level you may be creating codependency in your family. And so, one of the biggest, so the next, number 2, guard your expectations of each other. They're not supposed to be your God. They're not supposed to be your provider. Hope deferred makes the heart sick, but when the desire comes, it's a tree of life. See, when our expectations are in our parents, or as grandparents, when our expectations are in our children or even our grandchildren, when we expect them to make us happy, when we expect them to make us feel fulfilled, then we create new expectations on them that actually breeds failure and hurt. Because none of us are going to be perfect, right? And none of us, and they're not going to meet the expectations we have of them. Number 3, and this goes either way, don't put the children in the middle. They're not pawns. They're not to try to get your will. They're not to try to make somebody feel guilty. We don't need to do that. That's going to create chaos and pain and hurt when we put them in the middle. And here's the thing. We're only hurting them more than anybody else if we do that. In Matthew chapter 18, verse 6 said this, and thank God for grace, because we all make mistakes, but whosoever shall offend one of these little ones which believe in me, it were better for him that a millstone were hanged about his neck, and they were drowned in the depth of the sea. I don't think Jesus likes us using children very much. He was pretty firm on that, wasn't he? And offend there means to put a stumbling block or an impediment in the way. And see, whenever we put children in the middle, we're putting a stumbling block in their way. We're putting an impediment between them. And then the 4th thing is respect and appreciate one another. We've lost, in our society, there's been a much lost art of disagreeing while respecting. It's like, I have to respect you if I agree with you, but if I don't agree with you, all bets are off. And you see that in politics, you see that in families, you see that in every area. Proverbs 14:11 says the wise woman, and I'm going to paraphrase that a little because I think it doesn't refer just to a woman there. A wise person builds his or her house, but the foolish one pulls it down with their own hands. That's what happens. When we don't respect each other, we're tearing down our house around us. When we don't have that respect that was talked about when I was talking about love earlier. Lady Wisdom, Proverbs 14:1 in Message says, Lady Wisdom builds a lovely home. Sir Fool comes along and tears it down, brick by brick. Proverbs 15:1 says, a soft answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. And so one of the ways that we can learn to respect each other is to clarify before jumping to conclusions. When it's family, isn't it easy to jump to conclusions? Huh? Come on. It's really, why are they doing that? I know why they're doing it. No, you don't. That's what judgment is. That's what the Bible says. When we decide we know why somebody's doing what they're doing, we've entered into judgment. And it's hard to respect people when we judge them. When we decide we know why they've done what they've done, it's hard to have respect for them. And respecting and appreciating each other for not for what they offer us, but for who they are, begins to bring this peace inside the home. And then this goes along with all of it, but ask God to help you deal with your insecurities. I quote the great pastor Alan Spiegel. If you think you don't have insecurities, you're too insecure to admit it. So instead of saying, well, I don't have any, ask God to help you see them and help you deal with them, because insecurities is one of the ways that we tear down our household. It's one of the reasons why we can't respect, because we're so busy trying to get respect for ourselves that we can't respect others. And that those insecurities bring forth those things in our life. And as I said, this is both ways. Whether you're here and you're a parent or whether you're here and you're a grandparent, these things are things that we all need to work on so that we can have the relationships that we need to have, and so that we can do what God has called us to do as family. So now I'm going to take just a few minutes and talk more directly to you grandparents. How many are here? Do we have anybody here? Am I speaking to anybody that are grandparents? Okay, so here's some love exhortations for you. First of all, remember you're the grandparent, not the parent. Short and sweet and true, right? We've read the scripture and we've had it earlier in Matthew. It talks about, for this reason, A man shall leave his father and his mother and be joined to his wife, and the two shall be one flesh. So they are no longer to be one flesh. Therefore, what God has joined together, let no man separate. You know, the Bible says that we're called apart there to a degree, and we have to remember as grandparents, you know, so what if it's not the way you did it? Matter of fact, my wife and I have chuckled about this. We were about this close to mass murders when our kids were born because we let them sleep on their stomach and we let Have you noticed how many rules have changed? Don and I look at each other occasionally and we say, well, we don't know how our kids lived to be 18 years old. But we have, and even in those things, you know, we have to pull back and understand. Again, a lot of the reasons, a lot of times that parents are cut off is because they can't keep their mouth shut. Well, they don't care what you did. You know. Now, with the right relationship, you might have a little bit of input, but they don't really care. They know more than you anyway now. You know, that's just human nature, right? Yeah. You see, trying to control, listen to this, close. Underline it in your notes. Trying to control, no matter how good the intentions, can do incredible damage. And probably will do incredible damage. Remember what you can do. You can pray. You can impart. But to go beyond that begins to work against itself. And Proverbs chapter 3 verse 5 says, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not unto your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge Him, and He shall direct your paths. Trusting, and that doesn't just talk about, that's talking about being a grandparent. Trust in the Lord to speak to them. Trust in the Lord to help them through it. Trust in the Lord to give them wisdom. Trust in the Lord. And you know, this is something that you know, I've come to understand. I'm an ultra conservative as far as finances and that kind of thing. And so what is a risk to me is not a risk at all to a lot of people. So if I just try to talk to somebody out of my own, if I try to control people out of what's comfortable to me, instead of helping them, I'm going to hurt them. I may even cause them not to go after God's will. Because, you're going to borrow $10? I wouldn't do that if I was you, you know. I told somebody one time, I may be subject to almost every other temptation, but I'm not subject to over gambling because it hurts me too bad to lose that dollar. I'm telling you right now. My son, my youngest son was going through a real hard time at one time, kind of in rebellion, living out on his own, and the lottery got up to a certain amount, and my wife was just teasing him and said, are you going to buy a ticket? He said, no, I figured I needed that dollar a lot more than I could afford a ticket. True wisdom, wasn't it? So are we going to trust in the Lord, or are we going to remember that we no longer have that mantle? No matter if they are doing wrong, no matter if they're making mistakes, you know, we don't have that mantle anymore. Our mantle is to pray and to impart and to create an environment where our impartation is welcome. And one of the ways we do that is we have to remember who we're not. Because a lot of people right off the bat try to tell them what to do and try to keep instructing, and instead of it opening up opportunities, they shut the door. Be a godly example of love and faith. Your action speaks aloud. Ralph Waldo Emerson said, I can't hear a word you're saying. Found this interesting. Professor Gordon Rupp, the British historian, was asked how the church could survive decades of persecution in Russia. His answer was, it's largely due to grandparents. The communists made the big mistake of thinking that because the church was only full of old people, it had no future. They failed to realize that grandparents have an impact on their grandchildren. The old Russian grandparents passed their faith on to their grandchildren, and that is why in the last few years there's been a revival in Russia. Isn't that good news? We all want our grandchildren to have a better life. So one of the ways we do that is by being an example of love and faith. And you do that without always preaching at them too. A lot of times we think of faith, we think of becoming a preacher. No, you live that life in front of them. You live what you believe in front of them. You create an example in front of them. Because we all want our children and grandchildren to have a better life. The problem is sometimes we don't even know what that better life is. But I assure you that better life is having the peace and the grace of Jesus Christ in their heart where they have emotional stability. They're better off with minimum wage jobs and emotional stability than having the highest paying job in the land and no stability. And we can be the example of that, can't we? And we can love them. All right. Number 3. Are you ready for this one? You done looked at it, right? Know when to and how to give advice and back off when your advice is not wanted. Come on. Ron, less said, less dread, right? Didn't know what you said? Was it you that said that? Pride only breeds quarrels, but wisdom is found in those who take advice. I was meditating on that. We usually think of this scripture in terms of pride will breed quarrels from those who won't take advice, right? But pride also breeds quarrels when we're trying to give too much advice. When we think we know exactly how to tell them how to live and what to do, it breeds quarrels. Hello. The Bible says in Proverbs 25:11, a word fitly spoken is like apples of gold in settings of silver. Proverbs 23 says, it is an honor to a man to cease from strife, but every fool will be meddling. Unsolicited advice, this isn't a scripture, but it goes along with it, is rarely welcome. And if it's coming from one's own parents or in-laws, it will most likely be heard as criticism. So you got this, you just got to say. And you know something I found out a long time ago? If you got to say it, you probably shouldn't. I almost always get in trouble, whether it's with my wife or whoever it is. Whenever I got something I just got to say so bad that I can't keep my mouth shut, I'm always wind up in trouble. Look like I'd learned, doesn't it? Yeah. Know when and how to give advice and back off when your advice is not wanted. Release your concerns to the Lord. That goes back to trusting the Lord. We talked about that earlier. You trust God to bring them through. Trust God to change their minds. Trust God to direct them. Trust God. Well, what happens if it doesn't look like anything's happening? You think you can fix it if God can't? You think shutting off communication, making them angry where they don't even want to talk to you, that's a great way to help. Works every time, right? You got to release your concerns to the Lord and quit trying to be the God of their life. Now, I know we don't call it that, and that's not our intentions, but when we start trying to direct our children's lives and tell them how to do everything, we're trying to be their God. So, number 5, respect boundaries, but seize the opportunities you have. Yeah. Depending on circumstances, I've got very open, and I appreciate so much Johnny Ray and my daughter for allowing us to be so involved in their life. I get to to coach and do all kinds of things with them. They come over to the house, and Johnny Ray even likes to, with the younger kids, he'll like to ask them whose boy they are and that kind of thing. And when they're a certain age, they're usually, if they're with him, they'll say they're mine. If they're with me, they'll say they're his. You know what? They've learned from his aggravating spirit. We'll pray for him. That how to pick at each other. But, but I respect their boundaries. And one of the things, I love it when they come over and want to watch a movie. And I love it. I don't have to decide whether it's okay for them to watch or not. Ask your parents. It's not on me anymore. And now we did have one little hiccup in that we had to correct, because we found out that at a certain age, they might just tell their parents, come home, and that's when we started making sure we did that, because they might just go home and say, they might have told us that Mom and Daddy said it was okay, but when they go home and tell Mom and Daddy, they say, Boopas and Nani said it was okay. So you have to have some direct communication there, don't you? Use your heads as you live and work among outsiders. Don't miss a trick. Make the most of every opportunity. In other words, don't waste. Listen, this is a strong exhortation. Don't waste the opportunities you have with whining. I mean, I know that if you've got an older grandparent, that every time you go see them, you spend 20 minutes with them, and 15 of them, if them complaining about you hadn't been lately, that makes you really want to go. It makes you want to go, doesn't it? Your best, you cannot allow your own emotions to keep you from seizing the opportunities you have. Don't do that. Don't complain, and be adaptable to conditions and the changes that life brings. Like I said, I just love talking about my grandchildren, and my favorite job on earth, being a grandparent. I just got to be honest with you. It's so much fun. We have such a good time, and God's grace has opened up some opportunities to us. But one of the things that Cooper waved, and Ariana waved at everybody. We're adding a granddaughter finally to our family in this fall. So we're going to have to learn how to relate to girls. But anyway, 8 grandboys, in case you didn't know. But one of the things that I've recognized early on, my oldest grandson, who I'm talking about here and embarrassing him, I got a hat that says, "Be careful what you say, because I'm a pastor, and whatever you say may be preached on tomorrow." But we just bonded, just tight. Of course, he named me. We were supposed to have a simple name, Pa or whatever, Grandpa or whatever. What do you want him to call? I don't care what he calls me, just as long as he calls me, And so they taught him to say Grandpa. Was that what he's trying? And when he started talking, it came out Boopas. And so now I'm Boopas or Doodas, or depends on what age they are, but usually it comes back around to Boopas. But so we had this bond and this closeness, and he loved sports, and so he started coming over at my house and watching games. So one of the things that I began to realize is that his softness and love we have between each other and care, that it could become an obstacle to him eventually. So I started telling him, I started telling him several years ago, one of these days, you're going to drop me like a hot potato. The right girl's going to come by, and instead of you coming over here 3 or 4 times a week to watch a ball game with me, you're going to be with her instead of me. Now, I wasn't doing that to make him feel guilty. That's wrong if you're doing that. I was doing that because I knew that change of life was going to come. And for one thing, I didn't want him to feel guilty. And for another thing, I didn't want to cry when it happened. So I was working on both of us, because you have to adapt to the changes of life. And now he doesn't come and watch near as much ball with me, but he's texting me nearly every day. So we maintain that closeness. But what do you think would have happened if I'd have said, "Why are you not teasing, preparing him for it, but why aren't you coming to see me anymore? Don't you love me anymore? Don't you care about me?" He might come, but there won't be life in it. And see, I want there to be life and impartation when they're with me. I want to make a difference in their life. I want them to see love and care for love. And then, what else do we do with the opportunities we have? Make memories. Come on. I know that was said earlier, but we have that opportunity. Why do toy makers watch the divorce rate? Have you ever read about this? Because when it rises, so do toy sales. According to analyzers, for parents and grandparents tend to compete when they're going through struggles. They tend to compete for the affections through toys. Now, I'm not saying it's wrong to buy a toy for your kids, but I'm going to tell you, make memories. You want to flash that up there? You got that? Make memories. Enjoy each other. And I've never, contrary to what somebody might tell you, I've never made some of you that don't understand running, I've never made one of my grandchildren run. I do not require it. And that day, Ron, that happened, I told him, I said, well, you can quit if you want to. I'm not going to be upset at you if you don't run. But he was determined enough he was going to run anyway. And the next time we ran, he was there running too. But, we have these, again, you may not have, I could have had pages of pictures. We got all kinds of pictures. And every year, a few years ago, we decided we weren't going to struggle. I think God gave us this wisdom. We decided it's so aggravating to try to make sure you get the right toys and all this stuff at Christmas, and you just kill yourself. So we started giving our kids, when they were younger, we started giving our grandkids a trip. So and with 8 of them, we can't necessarily, that ages range. So now this year we're going to probably have 3 different trips that we're taking with our grandkids, because we got different ages and different things that they enjoy. But we took the next to the youngest and his brother on a one-night trip last year, and just to show you how these memories work. So the next year he gets to go this year with his younger brother, who has never been on one. So they've been real excited about that. And so we asked him the other day, what do you want to do on this trip? To the exact thing, he described everything we did last year. Where we ate, when we went swimming in an indoor pool, we went by the park. Everything we did last year, he repeated. And again, if you don't have that access, don't curse the opportunities you do have. Find ways to make memories even if you don't have that same access. But if you do have that access, seize the moment. Take advantage of it. And here's something that I found out. Some things that you don't even have to really like, but if they love it, you'll enjoy it. Charles Francis Adams, the 19th century political figure and diplomat, kept a diary. One day he went fishing with my son today. A day wasted. His son, Brooke Adams, also kept a diary that he'd learned to keep from his daddy, which still is in existence. On the same day Brooke Adams made this entry, went fishing with my father, the most wonderful day of my life. Father thought he was wasting time. But the child saw it. It's the greatest day in his life. Don't waste the opportunities you have. Take advantage of them. I'm about to run out of time, so I'll really quickly run through this, and you've got your notes and you can read it. Now, parents. We're mainly talking to grandparents. Now, we've got some parents here, right? Don't expect your parents to raise your children. Make a careful exploration of who you are and the work you've been given. If you are a parent, you have been given the grace to be a parent. You can need to tap into that maybe, but God has equipped you. That's part of your calling on life. Matter of fact, that's your most important calling at this part in your life when you're raising them. He says, give the work, sink yourself into that. Don't be impressed with yourself. Don't compare yourself with others. That's wonderful too. Each of you must take responsibility for doing the creative best you can with your own life. Number 2, don't withhold your children from grandparents to get your way or to punish them because you did not get your way. I've seen that. I mean, my wife has a friend right now, and they want them to keep their kids on the weekend or something, and if their parents can't, they won't let them go see them for 2 weeks. I mean, it's childish and immature. But, you know, you're removing some of that ability to impart when you do that. Don't take, don't take what your parents do for you for granted. Appreciate what they do and verbalize it. Not because they are egotists, but because of what that does for you when you recognize that they are trying to help out in your life. You know, if not, we can even, without meaning to, we'll start taking for granted the blessings we have around us. So don't take what your parents do for you for granted. Appreciate it and verbalize it. Don't allow pride to rob you from asking for or heeding to good advice. We talked about the other side, us not giving advice as grandparents when we shouldn't or over pushing it, but you also need to be open to advice and understanding. And then number 5, if boundaries need to be in place, be clear. Often, I hope I'm not the only clueless person in this building, but often I'm doing something that bothers somebody and I have no clue. Now, how do you expect me to correct it if I don't even know? Now, I know there's a possibility. Sometimes the Lord will show you through their faces or whatever, you've done something wrong here. But you have the responsibility as parents, and boy, this can be uncomfortable, to your parents, now that you're the head of your house, that if you have expectations or boundaries, you need to be clear. And it's wonderful if the relationship's good enough to where there can be an adjustment there, if where you can actually talk it out, and there might be a situation where your boundaries are too high, and you can adjust them. But if you don't talk about it, you just get frustrated with each other. And they're frustrated because they don't know what's clear and what they can and can't do, and you're frustrated because they're not doing what you want them to do. So be willing to communicate and talk. Right.
Awesome. Man, have you been blessed today?